The neighbor's party. The house across the street had stood quiet for months after the Clarks, its previous owners, moved to a retirement home. They had lived there for nearly 50 years, always friendly and kind, and I missed their presence. When the house sold, I expected a young couple or a family to move in and continue the same neighborly tradition. Little did I know, things were about to take a strange turn. I first met Carrie, the new owner, one afternoon while I was outside checking the mail. She waved and walked over, introducing herself with a wide, overly friendly smile. Carrie was about my age, maybe mid-30s, with strikingly intense eyes and a way of talking that felt like she was trying too hard to be liked. After a few minutes of small talk, she casually dropped a request. "Hey, I was wondering, do you mind if we use your driveway for parking next weekend? We're having a housewarming party and expect a lot of guests. Parking on the street is impossible here with all the traffic." Her question caught me off guard. I have a fairly large driveway, but it's circular with only one entrance and exit. If they used it for parking, I'd be completely blocked in. Politely, I told her I wasn't comfortable with that arrangement. "I'm sorry," I said. "It's just too much of an inconvenience. But if you want, your guests can park on the grass strip in front of my fence." The Clarks used to do that occasionally when they had big gatherings, and it never bothered me. Carrie's smile faded just a little. "That won't be enough," she insisted, her tone a bit sharper. "We're expecting a big group, and we'll need space for at least 10 more cars. It's just for a few hours. Can't you make an exception?" I repeated my refusal, and Carrie's smile turned into something more forced. She thanked me and walked back to her house without another word, leaving me with an uneasy feeling. I chalked it up to neighborly awkwardness, but something about her demeanor lingered in my mind. The week leading up to the party was strange. I noticed Carrie watching my house more often than not. When I'd come outside to mow the lawn or water the garden, she'd be there just standing in her yard, staring in my direction. Once, I caught her at night through my living room window, just standing on her porch, facing my house. I tried to ignore it, but things only got weirder as the weekend approached. One evening, I came home late from work and found a car parked at the edge of my driveway. It wasn't mine, and it definitely wasn't anyone I recognized. I figured it was a friend of Carrie's, maybe there for an early visit. I knocked on her door to ask if she could move the car. No answer. I knocked again, louder, but the house was silent. Lights were on inside, but it felt like no one was home. Frustrated, I went back to my house and decided to let it go for the night. The next day, the car was gone. But I noticed something else: deep tire tracks on the grass strip where I'd told Carrie she could let her guests park. No one had asked me, and the grass was ruined. I decided I'd confront her after the party. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. The night of the party arrived. From my living room window, I could see the guests arriving at Carrie's house, the street filling up with cars. For a while, everything seemed fine. The noise of music and laughter drifted over, typical of a housewarming event. Then, around 9 p.m., I heard voices outside much closer than I expected. I looked out the window and saw several cars parked in my driveway, just as I had feared. Furious, I grabbed my jacket and stormed outside to tell them to move. As I crossed the lawn, I saw Carrie standing by one of the cars, talking to a group of guests. When she saw me approaching, she gave me that same unsettling smile. "Hey! I hope you don't mind, there just wasn't enough room," she said, her voice dripping with fake charm. "It's only for a couple of hours. I promise they'll be gone before you know it." I was livid. "I specifically told you not to park here. I'll give you 10 minutes to have everyone move their cars, or I'm calling a tow truck." Her smile vanished, replaced by an icy glare. "There's no need to be rude," she snapped. "We're neighbors. Neighbors help each other out. Not like this," I shot back. 10 minutes. I walked away, but as I reached my front door, I could feel her eyes burning into my back. Something about her felt off, like she wasn't just angry, but something more. I waited inside, watching through the window. As the minutes passed, no one moved their cars. In fact, the party seemed to be getting louder. More cars pulled up, and to my horror, more of them parked in my driveway. My patience ran out. I grabbed my phone and called a tow company, explaining the situation. They said they could send someone out, but it might take a little time since it was a busy Saturday night. Frustrated, I hung up and decided to head back outside to confront Carrie again. But when I opened the door, something was wrong. The street, the driveway, everything was eerily quiet. All of the cars were still there, but the sound of the party had completely stopped. No music, no laughter, nothing. My stomach tightened with a sense of dread. I crossed the street to Carrie's house and knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. I circled around to the side of the house, where I could see through one of the large windows. The lights inside were still on, but the living room was empty, completely devoid of people. Just empty cups and plates scattered around. The guests were gone. I turned to leave when I heard a soft noise from behind the house, like the sound of metal scraping against metal. Slowly, I crept around the corner, my heart racing in my chest. What I saw made my blood run cold. In the backyard, behind the house, Carrie was standing by an open garage door, dragging a large, black garbage bag toward it. The way she moved was almost mechanical, her face expressionless, eyes locked straight ahead. As I stood frozen in place, I noticed something else. There were more bags piled inside the garage, neatly stacked one on top of the other. Something was terribly wrong. I stepped back, my foot crunching on a twig. Carrie's head snapped in my direction. For a moment, our eyes met, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Her expression didn't change, but there was something cold and calculating behind her gaze. Without a word, I turned and walked away, my heart pounding in my chest. As soon as I was out of sight, I broke into a run, racing back to my house. I locked the doors, grabbed my phone, and called the police. The next day, the police arrived and began their investigation of Carrie's house. The cars from the party had vanished overnight, but what they found in the garage sent shockwaves through the entire neighborhood. Inside the large, black garbage bags were clothes, piles of them, neatly folded. Each bag was labeled with a name. But the most disturbing discovery was a collection of personal belongings: phones, wallets, jewelry, and IDs, all belonging to people who had been reported missing in the area over the past year. The story that unfolded was horrifying. The party had been a cover for something far more sinister. Carrie and her so-called guests were part of a well-organized human trafficking ring. The reason they needed so much parking was that these parties were actually secret auctions, where vulnerable people, often kidnapped or lured under false pretenses, were being sold to the highest bidders. The guests I'd seen arriving weren't just regular partygoers, they were buyers and associates of the operation. But what about the bodies? The investigation revealed that Carrie's house had been a hub for storing these people before they were transported to other locations. When they were no longer needed or became a liability, they were disposed of. The bodies weren't in the garage at the time the police arrived, but the clothes and belongings were grim evidence that many of the people trafficked through the house had likely met a tragic end. The bags in the garage, with personal items and names, were from victims who had been trafficked or killed as part of this brutal scheme. Carrie herself was a key figure in the operation, responsible for luring people into her home under the guise of a welcoming party or a job opportunity. But once inside, they became prisoners. The eerie quiet and sudden disappearance of the partygoers the night before? It turned out that someone must have tipped Carrie off about my call to the police. She and her accomplices cleared the house before law enforcement could arrive, leaving behind only the evidence they couldn't quickly dispose of. Carrie was never seen again. The trafficking ring she had been part of had deep roots, and it seemed like she'd gone underground. But for me, knowing that I had been just a driveway away from such a horrific operation chilled me to my core. Every time I step outside now, I think about how close I came to getting involved, how lucky I was not to have let them use my driveway. What I thought was just a simple neighborhood dispute had, in reality, been my brush with something far darker.